Hey there, thanks for watching. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how to grow in 2022. I'm going to share my top 3 tips on how I personally have achieved growth and share them with you in the hopes that they'll help you and give you ideas on how to grow in 2022 and beyond. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, then just keep watching. So when I talk about growth, I mean growth across all areas in life, be that your physical health, your emotional health, your relationship health, your intellectual growth, and also your financial growth, which is pretty much the purpose and reason for my channel. Studies have shown that growth is so important because we as human beings are generally happiest when we are making worthy progress toward a goal. And I've certainly found this to be true in my life. Even when I am not making progress as fast as I would like, I find that I am happiest when I know that I'm moving in the right direction and actively growing toward those areas that I want to improve. So growth is important for happiness. So here are my 3 tips for growth in 2022 and beyond. Tip number 1 is to track. Tip number 2 is to set goals. And tip number 3 is to be accountable and check in with yourself. So I put them in this order for a very specific reason. So again, tip number 1 is to track your behavior, your growth, your finances, really tracking everything that's important to you in those areas where you want to grow. Tip number 2 is to set goals. Even if you're not where you want to be, especially if you're not where you want to be. Setting goals is critical to achieving that growth and being able to measure your growth. And tip number 3 is to check in and be accountable with yourself. How can you tell if you're making any significant growth if you don't check in and really force yourself to face where you are? And really, it's a cycle that just continues. So that's tracking, setting those goals, and then checking in, and then continuing to track, set goals, and then check in with yourself. Tip number 1 is tracking. That's tracking in all areas where you want to grow. So for the purposes of this example, I'm going to choose 3 areas for growth. That would be your financial health, your physical health, and your relationship health, because those are areas that generally people either want to be doing better in or to continue growing in. So again, that's financial, physical, and relationship growth that we're looking to achieve. So in the area of financial growth, really that's just looking at the numbers, looking at how much you spend and how much you're bringing in, and the difference between those 2 things. For physical health, again, pretty simple, how much you eat and how much you move, calories in and calories out. It's not always as simple as that, but just getting an idea of where you are baseline is really important. So you got to track yourself in order to know where you are starting. And then number 3 is relationship health. Now, this is something that's maybe a little bit more challenging to quantify and to track, but it is something that you can track in terms of maybe your happiness, or if you're with a partner, their estimation of your relationship together. So it's a little bit more qualitative, as in the quality of your relationship, but it is absolutely trackable. Just put it on a scale from 1 to 10, both your estimation personally, and then if you are working with a partner, your partner's estimation of your overall relationship health. Tracking is so important because, again, how can you know where you are if you don't track where you're starting? So overall, just a tip, I've learned personally that the simpler the tracking methods are, the better. You want them to be comprehensive, as in they kind of cover all areas of this area that you're looking to grow in, but you don't want to get overcomplicated. So for example, in the area of finances, I've learned that simplest is best. And I still track my expenses every single day, but rather than having like 20 different categories, I now only have 4 or 5. So that's kind of my updated budget and spending tracking. I really learned that simplicity is best. Tip number 2 is setting goals. This can be a little bit challenging because if you're anything like me, you've set goals in the past and maybe haven't achieved them or haven't come as close to achieving them as you may have wanted, and then maybe you got a little bit discouraged and then just kind of gave up on the whole thing. So that is a cycle that sometimes I can get caught up in, but if I'm really on it, I will set the right goals and be able to come really close or close enough to kind of give myself that feeling of growth, which is really what we're after. So the key with setting goals is to make them ambitious but manageable. So for example, rather than thinking that you're going to pay off all your debt or you're going to save a massive amount in an emergency fund or in an investment account. A, breaking it down into smaller chunks that are achievable, but B, making sure that you hit that sweet spot between a goal that is both ambitious and yet achievable. So the key here is kind of to aim moderately. I don't want to say aim low, but really make sure that you're setting a goal that you are able to achieve comfortably. And tip number 3 is to check in and be accountable. So this is the one that I find A, makes the biggest difference, and B, is the most challenging to do because it makes you confront your own growth trajectory or lack of trajectory. So if you're doing fine and you're doing what you need to do and you're hitting your goals, then checking in is wonderful and it's very rewarding. But if you're not doing what you need to do and implementing your tactics, then it can be a little bit more challenging to do, right? And you don't necessarily want to confront your own sort of lack of progress. So this process of having to confront where you're not meeting your goals and you're not implementing the steps you need to implement in order to hit your goals is called productive tension. That's when you realize the difference between what you want to do and what you're actually doing. So when you're confronted with this productive tension, you have 2 options. Number 1 is to just abandon your tracking altogether. And number 2 is to actually improve. And if you take the option to really stick with it and actually implement the things you need to do, so you change your behavior to do what you need to do in order to achieve that growth, then that's where the real magic happens. So the key in this checking in and being accountable is to lean into that productive tension and to allow it to inspire you to growth rather than discouragement. So this is really difficult, and I've seen this myself. I've known this for myself, that it's really hard when you're confronted with that difference between what you're doing and what you actually want to do. But I'll give you an example of something that happened to me recently and the changes that I decided to make. So I looked at my tracking for my spending for the last 3 months, so that's September, October, and November. And I saw a big difference between what I was actually spending and what I actually wanted to spend. Some of those were seasonal expenses, gifts and whatnot, and I kind of made the conscious decision to spend a little bit more in those categories, but I knew that that wasn't what I wanted to be spending. So decided to buckle down and tighten the belt for this month coming up. So that was a big change that I implemented in my own spending. And while it's a little bit painful, I'm seeing that it's paying off in the long term. So that's just one way that you can use productive tension to your benefit, but only if you stick with it, you check in and you're accountable. So I've spoken before about my love for the book, The 12-Week Year. I'll link to a playlist of videos on the 12-week year and the way that I've used that and implemented that in my own life. So a lot of these principles are taken from that book. I found that I've achieved the most growth personally when I really stick with these 3 tips. And I know that if you implement these tips for 2022 and beyond, that you'll achieve growth as well. So there you go. Those are my 3 tips to growth in 2022. I'd love to hear what your plans are for the upcoming year or what you're doing currently to achieve your own growth. So leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you as always for watching, and I hope you'll keep watching. Bye.